Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good luck sleeping. You're watching PNT. I'm your host, cheerfully pessimistic. Up front this week, according to an article by the Daily Mail, a British-led team of astronomers have identified a second great spot on Jupiter, our largest planetary cousin. While familiar with the larger-than-Earth-sized storm that is the Great Red Spot, astronomers were puzzled to discover a second, much smaller spot in the upper atmosphere of Jupiter. Much cooler than its hotter surroundings, the Great Cold Spot is approximately 15,000 miles across and 7,500 miles wide. Unlike the giant planet's familiar Great Red Spot, this newly discovered weather system is constantly changing its shape and size. Scientists suggest that the newfound Great Cold Spot could be thousands of years old. Customers everywhere may soon have their packages delivered by drones that will fly near to your home and then drive the rest of the way to your door, according to Advanced Tactics, manufacturer of the Panther autonomous drone. Part drone, part SUV, the dog-sized machine is capable of lifting up to 10 pounds and can operate in day, night, and adverse weather conditions. Advanced Tactics states the drone can be customized with various robotic arms, cameras, sensors, and video screens. Possible other uses than delivering that order of toilet paper from Amazon include building inspections, search and rescue missions, and, of course, the more obvious security and military applications. While Advanced Tactics does not offer the ability to weaponize your Panther, you know it's only a matter of time before some enterprising soul sticks an RPG on the back of this bad boy. While most seem to be welcoming our new robot overlords with open arms, we here at PNT will be playing it safe and keeping an EMP grenade or two on hand for when we next hear the doorbell. Thanks to the joint efforts of thousands of citizen scientists and astronomers from the Australian National University, the search for Planet 9, also known as Nibiru or Planet X, has gotten a huge boost. The astronomers at ANU recently launched a website which sought the help of volunteers to sort data collected by ANU's SkyMapper telescope. The SkyMapper scope is used to detect the gravitational signatures of any rogue or unknown planets. To the scientists' amazement, thousands of volunteers gave their time freely to sort through the mountainous piles of data. One unnamed volunteer identified over 12,000 individual objects alone. With the help of the volunteers, the astronomers have identified 4 likely candidates which might be the long-rumored Planet X. While the likelihood remains that the 4 candidate objects could be dwarf planets or large asteroids, the team is optimistic. The 4 unknown objects will now be thoroughly studied over the coming months using the SkyMapper telescope. And now, PNT is pleased to bring you our weekly report. Throughout World War II at Muroc Army Air Field, California, later to become Edwards Air Force Base, and the adjacent Rodgers Dry Lake Test Site, scientists and engineers tested and developed the latest aircraft, including many secret or black projects. The area essentially provided many of the same services that the under-construction Area 51 would eventually take over. Well familiar with anything that flies, the base technical personnel and commanding officers had no explanation for the UFOs which brazenly maneuvered over the area on July 7th and 8th of 1947. Merely days after the Roswell crash, officers watched helplessly as numerous disc-shaped objects were observed cavorting over the secret base in what would become known as the Muroc Incident. July 7th, 1947, Muroc Army Air Field, California, 10:10 a.m. Army Air Force experimental test pilot Major J.C. Wise is seated in the cockpit powering up his XP-84 jet on the runway when he spots a crowd of personnel staring intently at an object in the sky. Following their gaze, he looks towards the north and witnesses a yellowish-white sphere, approximately 5 to 10 feet in diameter, moving at approximately 10,000 to 12,000 feet altitude. Wise and the others watch in amazement as it flies above them, moving from west to east at about 200 to 225 miles per hour before vanishing into the distance. July 8th, 1947, Muroc Army Air Field, 9:45 a.m. Army Airfield First Lieutenant Joseph C. McHenry jokes with post-exchange personnel that someone will have to show me one of these discs before I'll believe it. En route to his office from the base post-exchange, he gets his wish when he spies two silver saucers following a test plane in flight. Stopped dead in his tracks by the sight, he quickly calculates the speed of the objects at over 300 miles per hour and concludes that they're flying at an altitude of approximately 8,000 feet. After observing the craft for a few moments, McHenry attracts the attention of Sergeant Joseph Ruvolo, Sergeant Gerald E. Newman, and Miss Jeanette Marie Scott. Calling them over, he points to the crafts and asks, "Tell me what you see up there." After confirming that, yes, they too can see the flying discs, the group watches in amazement as the first two objects are joined by a third, and for over 4 minutes they watch the saucer-shaped craft, silver and apparently metallic, fly in a wide circular pattern above the base and nearby Rodgers Dry Lake test facility. The three UFOs were silent and left no air contrails or disturbances of any kind as they proceeded to fly in tight circles above the base, hovering and maintaining altitude, displaying speeds and capabilities beyond that of any known aircraft before finally moving off towards the northwest and towards Mojave, California. As Sergeant Newman later stated in his official report, "This object, to my knowledge of aircraft, could not have been an airplane because of the very tight maneuver it was undergoing. I have been flying in and been around all type of aircraft since 1943, and never in my life have I seen anything such as this. If necessary, I can and will swear to this statement." 11:50 a.m., Rodgers Dry Lake Test Area. Army Air Force experimental test pilot Captain John Paul Strapp, a Mr. Lenz from Wright Field, and two others in an observation truck at Area 3 of Rodgers Dry Lake Test Bed are testing a P-82 ejection seat when they spy a round silver or aluminum white object descending on them rapidly from 20,000 feet before leveling out. At first thinking they might be seeing a stray parachute from the ejection seat test, they estimate the size of the object to be about 25 feet wide. Their conclusions are altered rapidly as they realize that their parachute, in fact, appeared to be a solid craft, oval in shape with two thick fins or knobs on the upper surface which seemed to rotate or oscillate. The craft had no propellers or other obvious forms of propulsion, and for nearly 2 minutes the men watched in amazement as the object slowly drifted horizontally towards nearby Mount Wilson to the south, before finally vanishing over the horizon. 12:00 p.m., Muroc Army Air Field. For over 8 minutes, Muroc Army Air Field base personnel, including Muroc Commanding Officer Colonel Signa A. Gilkey, Major Richard R. Shoup, and his wife, independently witnessed from 2 separate locations on the base the events over Rodgers Dry Lake. The witnesses all reported seeing the same oval craft fall from 20,000 feet before leveling off and slowly moving towards them. They watched in stunned amazement as the oscillating object descended to ground level, before rising again and finally moving slowly off into the distance. None of the military witnesses, trained observers, and familiar with the most advanced aircraft in the possession of the United States Air Force at the time, could identify what they had seen. 4 p.m., 40 miles south of Muroc Army Air Field. Exactly 4 hours later, the pilot of an F-51 flying at 20,000 feet, about 40 miles south of Muroc Air Base, reports sighting a flat object of light-reflecting nature, flying above his airplane. Reporting that the object had no vertical fin or wings, he attempted to gain altitude enough to intercept, but his F-51 would not climb high enough to reach the object. All air bases in the area were contacted, but they reported that they had no aircraft in the vicinity. The various witnesses in this remarkable event were debriefed, filed their reports, and went back to military life. The resultant investigation into the matter was a classic example of the Air Force's attitude towards UFOs at the time. Barely cursory, the final report on the incidents filed on August the 18th of 1947 simply contained copies of the witnesses' reports and the following two-line summary and conclusion. On 8th July 1947, approximately 1000 hours, 2 incidents occurred in the vicinity of Muroc Flight Test Base. No further investigation of these incidents is being considered by this headquarters. The file and investigation were marked pending/closed, filed away, and forgotten about. At least on the surface, because according to Captain Edward Ruppelt's infamous top-secret estimate of the situation, the incidents at Muroc Army Air Field and Rodgers Dry Lake Test Site were stated as the reason the Air Force was ultimately left with no other choice but to conclude that UFOs were interplanetary in nature. As we look at the sightings at Muroc, Rodgers, and Holloman Air Force Base as detailed in PNT's episode covering Project Twinkle, an obvious pattern begins to emerge. Is it possible, as the data contained in these official reports suggest, that intelligences from outside our world attempted to contact us during the late 1940s and early 1950s? Did we ignore that contact out of fear or lack of understanding? We here at PNT can only offer you the facts and encourage you to draw your own conclusions, but there is no denying that the data seems to speak for itself. We thank you for watching PNT and ask that you click like, share, and subscribe below. I'm your host, reminding you to keep an open mind, because a closed one shuts out the truth.